Following the Civil War, there was a period of Reconstruction, or rebuilding after the war, in which the Union had to integrate the former Confederacy back into their nation. There was still a large amount of tension between the northern states and those formerly of the Confederacy regarding political, economic, and social issues. Although the fighting was over, the fate of the southern states still needed to be determined. The essential question to consider is, to what extent were the issues that brought the U.S. to a brutal civil war resolved during the period known as Reconstruction?
The Civil War left the South in ruins, both geographically and economically. Most of their transportation system was destroyed, and the emancipation of African Americans hurt the agricultural system. Lincoln, believing that the South should not be punished, proposed the Proclamation of Amnesty and Reconstruction, which required the South to take an oath of loyalty and accept the new laws concerning slavery before organizing a new state government. The radical Republicans did not like this lenient plan, as they wanted to become very powerful in the South. One of the issues that caused the Civil War was that the South's desired government structure gave the states more control, while the North believed this to weaken the nation. Although not what the South wanted, this was somewhat resolved during Reconstruction by making a more powerful federal government. The Wade-Davis Bill proposed that the Southern states could hold a constitutional convention to set up a new government after they took an oath of loyalty to the Union. After the Civil War, slavery was abolished despite the South's resistance. The Freedmen's Bureau, a federal government agency, was founded to care for refugees and former slaves from the South.
Following Lincoln's assassination, the Vice President, Andrew Johnson, took control of office. His more severe plan included the Proclamation of Amnesty, which would pardon the former citizens of the Confederacy who took an oath of loyalty, as well as return their property. Though if the property was worth more than $20,000, it would be confiscated. The South passed a series of laws called the Black Codes, which limited the freedom of African Americans to the point where their conditions were similar to those of slavery. The codes were meant to counteract the policies of radical Republican Reconstruction, greatly angering the North. In response, the radical Republicans formed the Joint Committee on Reconstruction, developing their own program that would take the place of Johnson's. They implemented the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which granted citizenship and equal rights to all men in the U.S. This was an attempt to override the Black Codes, though they also established the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. This granted equal rights and protected of the law to all persons born in the U.S. Johnson did not support the 14th Amendment due to his focus on Reconstruction, and he thus lost the support of Republicans. The Military Reconstruction Act, proposed by the radical Republicans, discarded Johnson's programs and split the former Confederacy into 5 military districts, which each had to redesign an acceptable constitution, including the 14th Amendment. Due to his resistance to the Tenure of Office Act, which required Senate's approval of the removal of a government official, Johnson faced impeachment, or being charged with crimes in office. Just one vote short of conviction, he was nonetheless demoralized. In the election of 1868, Grant was nominated as a Republican candidate and won the title of president. Soon after, the 15th Amendment was proposed, granting the right to vote to African Americans. This was, of course, strongly resisted by the South.
As the southern states began to form their new governments, Northerners, called carpetbaggers, moved there to take up positions in office, though the South viewed them as intruders. Scalawags also came to the South to take advantage of the Reconstruction policies of the Republicans. As African Americans began to gain more rights, they also gained higher positions in office. However, the South did not like this black republicanism, as they called it, and wanted to rid their governments of former enslaved persons. The Republicans formed many policies in the South during Reconstruction. They repealed the Black Codes, rebuilt the transportation system, and imposed high taxes. However, with great power comes great responsibility, and some Republicans became corrupt, giving the Democrats a good argument when trying to retake power. Meanwhile, African Americans were building their new lives. They formed schools and academies in an effort to gain an education and express their new freedom and religion through the establishment of churches, and developed a very supportive community. The white Southerners were very resistant and formed a secret society called the Ku Klux Klan, who wanted to regain democratic control of the South. They terrorized Republicans and former slaves. The federal government soon passed the Enforcement Acts, which outlawed these crimes to promote better conditions for the carpetbaggers and African Americans.
With Grant as president, Congress expanded Reconstruction programs. However, Grant was accused of corruption and financial charges that greatly marred his reputation. He was unable to gain support for his third term. Meanwhile, an economic depression known as the Panic of 1873 was sweeping the U.S. as well as Europe, leaving many unemployed. This greatly hurt the Republicans, and the Democrats resumed power in the House of Representatives. With the rising influence, the Democrats made the enforcement of Reconstruction policies difficult. They wanted to redeem the South from black republicanism, and they would not let anything stand in their way. However, the Compromise of 1877 was proposed to end the corruption in the government. The compromise put Republican Rutherford B. Hayes in power as president and ended Reconstruction. Now that Reconstruction was over, the South needed to begin developing their economy. This industrializing region was called the New South as they advanced their transportation system and strengthened agriculture. However, sharecropping, or paying shares of crops for rent, was common to maintain the status quo between whites and African Americans.
Overall, the issues that caused the Civil War were primarily resolved in favor of the North, with a strong federal government, equal rights for African Americans, and a strong Republican Party. However, a peaceful future seemed on the horizon for the United States.